You scroll through your feed and see someone your age announcing something. A promotion, a new apartment, a business they launched, a trip they took, a life that appears to be moving. And for a second, just a second, you feel it. Not quite jealousy. Something quieter and more uncomfortable than that. A vague, sinking awareness that the distance between where you are and where you thought you'd be by now is larger than you expected. You close the app, you open it again. You put the phone down, but the feeling stays. The feeling that everyone around you is advancing while you are somehow standing still, and you can't fully explain why. And you're not sure if it's your fault, and the not knowing is almost worse than anything else. This feeling has a name in some circles. People call it falling behind, and it's become one of the most quietly pervasive experiences of modern adult life. Not a crisis, not a breakdown. Just a low, steady sense of being on the wrong side of a gap that keeps widening. Between you and the life you intended. Between you and the people around you. Between the person you are today and the person you expected to be by now. Most people respond to this feeling in one of two ways. They either push harder in a kind of anxious, unfocused surge of effort that burns out quickly and leaves them exactly where they started, or they go numb. They scroll more, distract more, avoid the feeling until it becomes background noise. Neither response addresses what's actually happening, because what's actually happening isn't what most people think it is. The silent reason most people fall behind has almost nothing to do with effort, talent, or circumstance. It has to do with a specific invisible pattern that operates below the level of daily decision-making and quietly determines the trajectory of a life over months and years. It's not dramatic, it's not a single mistake. It's a compounding effect of one particular orientation toward time and action that modern life actively encourages, and that almost nobody identifies until they've already lost significant ground to it. That orientation is this: living almost entirely in the reactive present while the future takes care of itself. Spending your days responding to what's already arrived rather than creating what hasn't yet. Managing the current situation rather than building toward the next one. Keeping up with everything that's incoming. The messages, the tasks, the demands, the noise, and treating that as progress when what it actually is maintenance. And maintenance, no matter how diligently practiced, doesn't compound. It just keeps you in place. This is where things get strange. The people who fall behind in life are very often not the people doing nothing. They're the people doing a great deal, constantly, exhaustingly, but almost exclusively in the reactive lane. They're responding, managing, attending, putting out fires, keeping things running. Their days are genuinely full. Their effort is genuinely real. But the specific kind of activity they're engaged in almost all the time is the kind that resets to zero every day. You answer the inbox today and tomorrow, it's full again. You manage the problem today, and next week, there's another one. The work is real, but it doesn't build anything that wasn't there before. And so the years pass in a state of constant effort, and the position barely moves. The people who move forward, who accumulate, who seem to progress in ways that compound over time, tend to share one consistent pattern that's easy to overlook from the outside. They protect a portion of their time and attention for the work that doesn't feel urgent, but builds something real. They do this consistently, even when the reactive demands are loud. They treat the non-urgent forward-building work as non-negotiable, even when nothing bad will happen today if they skip it. And because that kind of work compounds, because a skill developed slowly becomes a capability that opens doors, because a relationship tended consistently becomes a network that provides opportunity, because a project built incrementally becomes a thing that exists when before it didn't. The gap between them and people living entirely in the reactive lane grows slowly, but without stopping. What most people miss is that this gap is almost invisible in any given week. On any Tuesday, the person investing in forward-building work and the person spending that same time managing the reactive present look almost identical in terms of their daily experience. Both are tired, both are busy, both feel like they're working. The difference only becomes visible across months and years, when the compound interest of deliberate investment starts showing up as a gap in capability, position, confidence, and opportunity that feels mysterious to the person standing on the wrong side of it, because no single day felt like the cause. This explains why the falling behind feeling tends to arrive as a surprise. You didn't make one big wrong turn. You didn't have a dramatic failure. You just spent a long time, maybe years, living almost entirely in the reactive lane. Not because you chose to, but because the reactive lane is where modern life puts almost all of its pressure. The inbox demands response. The messages demand reply. The immediate always has a louder voice than the important. And without deliberate, sustained resistance to that pressure, the important work simply doesn't happen. Not because you're weak, because nothing in your environment is advocating for it. Nothing makes it urgent. Nothing creates consequences for deferring it today. So it gets deferred, quietly, day after day, while you stay current on everything that was already in front of you. There's also an emotional layer to this that compounds the problem. When you've been living reactively for a long time, something starts to happen to your sense of agency. You start to feel like you're being carried by the current rather than navigating it. Decisions start to feel like they're happening to you rather than being made by you. The future starts to feel like something that will arrive and find you rather than something you're actively building toward. This isn't passivity as a personality trait. It's a learned orientation that develops naturally when enough consecutive days are spent responding to the world rather than directing it. And once that orientation sets in, it affects everything. It affects what you attempt, what you believe is possible, what risks feel worth taking, how much ownership you feel over the trajectory of your life. The falling behind feeling is, in part, the feeling of that diminished agency. Not just the gap between where you are and where you wanted to be, but the deeper, more disturbing sense that you're not quite the one steering. That the life is happening and you're largely in it, rather than authoring it. And that sense is both accurate in terms of describing what's been happening and deeply uncomfortable in terms of what it implies about the future. What changes this is not a productivity system, not a better morning routine, not a list of goals written in a journal. What changes it is a fundamental reorientation in how you relate to your own time. Specifically, it requires recognizing that the reactive lane will always be full, always feel urgent, always generate consequences if ignored, and deciding that some portion of your time will be protected from it regardless. Not a large portion, not a dramatic withdrawal from your responsibilities, just a consistent, defended window, even a small one, that belongs to forward-building work before the reactive demands arrive to claim it. The specific shape of that window matters less than its consistency and its timing. Work done on your own initiative, towards something you've chosen, before the day's reactive demands begin, carries a different quality and produces different results than the same work attempted at the end of a depleted day. The version of you before the inbox opens is more creative, more focused, more capable of the kind of thinking that builds things. The version of you at the end of a full reactive day is depleted and best suited for rest, not for the work that requires your best. Using your best hours for someone else's priorities and your leftover hours for your own is a pattern that feels responsible in the short term and costs enormously in the long term. There's also something worth examining about the comparison that generates the falling behind feeling, because the comparison is almost always distorted in a specific way. What you're comparing is your interior experience of your life, the full unedited version, including all uncertainty, exhaustion, failure, and slow progress, against the curated, exterior presentation of someone else's life. The version they chose to show, the version designed to represent achievement rather than process. This comparison is always going to feel unfavorable, not because you're actually behind in any objective sense, but because you're comparing incomparable things. Nobody posts about the years of quiet, unremarkable daily effort that preceded the announcement you're feeling smaller than. You see the arrival and not the accumulation. And so the gap looks sudden and mysterious when it was actually slow and earned. This doesn't mean the feeling is wrong. It means the story the feeling is telling you might be incomplete. The person who seems ahead of you is not ahead because something happened to them. They're ahead, to whatever extent the comparison is even valid, because of thousands of small decisions made over a long period, most of which were invisible from where you're standing, and most of which are still available to you. The gap is not permanent. The gap is a function of time and direction is something you can change. Not all at once, not with a dramatic overhaul. Just by starting to do something consistently that moves in a direction you actually chose, rather than only attending to the directions the world keeps pushing you. Even 1 hour a day of genuine forward-building work, protected and repeated, compounds over a year into something real, over 3 years into something that changes what people see when they look at your life, over 5 years into something that would be unrecognizable to the version of you sitting here right now, carrying the quiet weight of feeling behind. The silent reason you've been falling behind is not a deficit of talent or effort or opportunity. It's the absence of a portion of your time that belongs to the future rather than to the management of the present. That portion can be small. What it cannot be is zero. And the moment it becomes something greater than zero, consistently, the direction changes. Slowly at first, then, over time, in ways the comparison will no longer be able to diminish. You are not behind because the race is over. You're behind because you've been running the wrong leg of it, and the leg that moves you forward is still there, waiting for the same number of hours everyone else gets, beginning tomorrow morning. If this felt familiar, comment falling behind. It helps me know this is something more people are silently dealing with.